Well, good morning. I'm here with Doug to talk about Salt Typhoon and other things. And it is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. But the first thing I got on my list is a New York Times article about Trump's new cryptocurrency venture. You know, Trump used to be down on Bitcoin, but of course, a few months ago, somebody said you could make money with crypto. And so he completely reversed his position. I think he also had a meeting with a big crypto investor who probably donated money to his campaign. But anyway, now he's issuing a cryptocurrency. And this seems to be even sleazier and more crooked than average for cryptocurrency projects, which is really saying a lot. It's like the Mos Eisley Cantina in Star Wars, where wretched hive of scum and villainy. So he's teaming up with a guy named Chase Harrow, who calls himself a dirtbag of the internet, able to sell anything to anyone. And the other guy, Zachary Folkman, ran a company called Date Hotter Girls, offering advice how to pick up women at bars. And so they're issuing Trump's new World Liberty Financial, a cryptocurrency venture. Now, his sons say that this will engineer a financial revolution based on digital dollars. Other crypto experts have expressed doubt, even alarm about the business. So even people in cryptocurrency feel like this is like completely shaky. These people have neither the business nor the technical knowledge to do this. So it sounds very much like Truth Social, where they put Devin Nunes in charge, who knows nothing about anything. And the whole thing is just spiraling down, sinking, which is, like most Trump's ventures, it's all fluff and no substance. So anyway, it's kind of interesting to see this come out. And what other thing I saw recently, which would probably explain this, Trump has about 8 projects he suddenly announced in the last few months, all to fleece his own supporters, like the Trump sneakers and the Trump Bibles and stuff. And there was a study that showed that when you post like things on Twitter about Trump, and then you put an information warning in the corner saying this is false, fact check it, Trump supporters believe it more when they see that fact check label on it. Because, of course, it's all about rebelling against the establishment. So I imagine this article exposing that this thing is all crooked will just get him more investors from his followers. So anyway,
Sam, that's pretty interesting. I just heard yesterday, I think from Marketplace or Marketplace Tech. I didn't know this that crypto or Bitcoin is now traded on the stock exchange.
they've been trying to do that for years. And yes, I think some Bitcoin funds did make it to the stock exchange, which is a step forward in its acceptance and legitimacy. But that doesn't, there's Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then there's thousands of shitcoins, which is what they all are, which are just scams. I mean, the first two have a reason to exist. The rest have very little reason to exist. They're all pretty much Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring this up now because HBO is about to create a movie on Bitcoin. And they don't have the conclusion, I don't think. And they're kind of following the rise of Bitcoin and where was it, Satoshi Nakamoto?
Yeah, yeah.
And has his identity ever been identified?
No, there was an Australian guy named Craig something who tried to claim to be him for years, and people asked the immediate reasonable question, if you're Satoshi Nakamoto, why don't you have the key to open his wallet that contains like $100 billion worth of crypto? Why are you,
Yeah,
why are you pretending? And he didn't have that secret key, and he proven in court to be just lying. So that's the fascinating part of it. The guy that invented it vanished early, never came back, and made an incredible amount of money that's just sitting there forever, abandoned. So you wonder, did he die, or is he really just a mathematician with zero interest in money? That's an interesting puzzle. Why did this guy do that and then not even take the money?
yeah, and supposedly he's the richest man in the world if he were to cash in.
Well, I'm sure he is. He
Yeah,
has like something like 5 or 10% of Bitcoin, which is a lot by now. And so it seems like he's either, such a abstract mathematician as to have no concern for worldly affairs at all, or he died.
yeah, yeah.
But I
Or,
mean, Bitcoin is a
or
pretty clever invention.
yeah, yeah. Or Sam, he's lost the password to his wallet.
Yeah, well,
Wallets,
yeah,
plural, I
I think
think.
something like 7% of all Bitcoins have been lost that way. They're just destroyed, which I'm sure the same thing is true of gold and paper currency and stuff. It's actually buried somewhere where it'll never be found, you know. This is not,
Yeah.
anyway. Um,
Well, yeah, yeah, interesting you bring up gold
yeah,
because from World War II era, there's the Nazi gold that Americans signed. There's several different shipments that disappeared,
yeah,
but there's one that would be, I think, in the billions of dollars today in today's currency
yeah,
that disappeared. The army signed for it, trucks picked up the boxes, and then they vanished. And then it's also claimed that there's up in the Alps that several lakes have Nazi gold buried in them. And to just add some credibility to that rumor, some about 5, 8 years ago, a little girl was swimming in one of the lakes and found a gold bar that was stamped with the Nazi swastika and turned out to be worth about 25,000 US dollars.
yeah,
And she was able to keep it.
yeah. I mean, ever since I was a kid, you hear about a pirate buried treasure somewhere, and so, to some extent,
Yeah.
that's really happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens from time to time, doesn't it?
Yeah,
All right. What's your next story? So that's
yeah,
interesting about Bitcoin. What's
yeah.
going on there? HBO movie coming up.
Well,
Sam,
yeah.
how about were you hit on Monday, Tuesday with the AT&T Verizon outage?
Yeah, yeah, and I never heard an explanation, but Verizon, I think, did go down, or T-Mobile, for several hours, so I you couldn't get any cell service at all, and I assume it has to do with the bad weather down south, but I don't know.
I don't think so. The outage was pretty widespread.
It was. I just think maybe if a whole state gets knocked out, that destabilizes the whole grid or something. But I just saw an article that said there is an outage. You didn't imagine it. My phone went to SOS mode, which is what it does when there's no internet, no cell connection at all. And it resolved after a few hours. No explanation.
Yeah, I haven't seen an explanation. And it wasn't one carrier either. So it was Verizon, AT&T,
Yeah,
several carriers were hit.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, I found an article on Ars Technica that I thought was interesting. Ants farm fungi, which I did not know, in particular leaf cutter ants. They cut these pieces of leaf, they carry it back home, they grow fungus on it, and they eat the fungus. And scientists recently investigated this, and they determined that ants learned to do this when the asteroid hit that wiped out the dinosaurs, because that created basically a nuclear winter. It changed the whole biology of America, of the planet. The whole planet was on a dust cloud for years, so there was effectively no sunlight, so almost everything died. The only thing that could survive was fungi, and they say that's where the plants learned to farm fungi, and they're still
The
doing it.
ants.
So
The ants learned to farm
yeah,
fungus.
that's why one
Yeah.
thing I've always thought is the ants actually rule the earth. They're doing just fine. They haven't even noticed us. They'll be here long after we're gone because they didn't bother with this nonsense called intelligence. If you have cold blood and no intelligence, you really don't need much food. And all you need to do is have a very simple algorithm. And they have an algorithm that's like 10 lines of Python. Follow the ant in front of you, find food, take it back to the nest. If there's no trail, wander randomly, find something. When you find it, leave a trail. It's a real simple algorithm, and it's very successful.
Yeah, Sam, I will disagree with you. Ants are pretty interesting.
Yeah,
They live in a colony,
yeah,
and it's a very complex social network that ants have in their colonies. And they also are very territorial.
yeah.
And there was an experiment that was done, oh, maybe 15, 18 years ago, where a researcher, so little background, in California, the little rice-sized black ants are called Argentine ants. They
Hmm.
came here from Argentina on coffee bags or in coffee bags, and we traced them to Texas and then on a train to Los Angeles and San Francisco at the time, roughly about 100 years ago, give or take. So it turns out specifically the Argentine ants have, and I know this is controversial, races. And we've also
Yeah.
seen this in with other animals. And what the experimenter did is they took ants from Northern California, Argentine ants, and
Mhm.
they mixed them with ants from San Diego, and the two would fight to the death.
Oh yeah.
But if you take ants from, say, Eureka, mix them with ants from San Francisco, they get along with each other. And the researcher kept going south, 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 found Costa Mesa, where there was somebody's driveway that just had piles of dead ants on it. And on one side of the driveway was the Southern California, I'll call it race, and
Mm.
the other is the Northern California. And
And
they'd fight to the death over territory.
yeah, yeah.
Whale killer whales, interestingly enough, same thing.
Hmm.
Killer whales up in Vancouver, there's a pod or groups of pods that all get along. They don't migrate and they stick together. And then there are migrating killer whales that come from Mexico, Southern California up to the coast, go up to Vancouver, and the two of them fight each other and they don't breed, they don't intermix with each other. They're completely separate.
Yeah, this
So
seems to happen. Yeah, happens among humans too. Tribals at war with each other.
yeah, yeah. So kind of interesting on that. All
Yeah.
right, what's your next story for us? Did you get
Well,
the salt? Did we talk about?
well, we'll get there. Yeah.
Okay,
There's
we'll
one
get
more,
there.
but
I'm
this
jumping.
one here, so Pavel Durov, the creator of Telegram, was arrested
Yeah.
in France. Now, he had advertised Telegram by saying it's an encrypted chat app, which it isn't really, and that we will never cooperate with any government and hand over your data to anybody. So it's basically advertising it's useful for crime. But now that he's been arrested in France, he said, all right, I'm going to start complying with court orders and handing over data to authorities. So the Nazis are fleeing Telegram now, and they're moving to a new one called Simple X Chat, which is technically less sophisticated, but they hope these guys will refuse to hand over data to authorities. So that's interesting. I mean, the Nazis have certainly flooded Twitter by all reports, but they're leaving Telegram. So it's the new place to go is Simple X Chat. This reminds me of 4chan. 4chan was the place for all the Nazis to go, and then it was 8chan, and then it was 8kun. As you know, every place gets flooded with Nazis, and amazingly enough, before long, you have to shut it down or change it after the Nazis move in. They're so horrible, nobody could stand them. And so they just keep jumping to the next place that they haven't polluted beyond tolerance yet. So
So yeah. So Sam, they're still in Twitter. Are they in Facebook? You know?
I think Facebook discourages them, but Twitter openly invites them now because Musk is totally red pilled.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he only removes liberal accounts now. Like one of the accounts published the hacked data from the Trump campaign, so that you banned that journalist from Twitter. And journalists say it's really bad for them to get banned from Twitter. They really count on Twitter for breaking news, even though it's completely
Interesting.
full of like alt-right stuff now.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
now we get to that one you were talking about, the Salt Typhoon attack, which is a Chinese-linked group hacking our telephone companies. And
Yeah.
they seem to have gotten in and they stole basically the same thing that China stole from Google in 2010. They stole the law enforcement surveillance data, which is I don't now what China supposedly wanted in 2010 was they wanted to find who anti-Chinese government groups. And all they wanted was the pen registry data because that's how you do it. You like arrest one member of the group, and then you see who does their friend call, warning everybody else, hey, they're cracking down on us. So just knowing who called who when is enough to find who's in a group.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And that seems like this is the same thing. And so it's both China and Russia are hacking our critical infrastructure. Um, Many reports of critical infrastructure like water plants and electric plants being hacked in minor ways. None of them have actually caused death or, in fact, even polluted the water or anything. What they've all had to do is just switch to like manual operation for a while as their
Yeah.
computer controls are down. But it does show the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure. But the ISPs were apparently owned for a few months, and the Chinese were just stealing what they wanted in there for a while, and it's all coming out. There's apparently many different ISPs: Verizon, AT&T, and Lumen.
Oh, interesting, huh?
Well, I wonder. Yeah, yes. I mean, with the cyber war continues. It's been this way for at least since 2010, really since 2005. We've known it's been happening, but it became public in 2010 that every nation is hacking every other nation, and the U.S. is performing the most attacks and experiencing the most attacks because we just have the largest internet presence. We're
Yeah,
like the we're like, the biggest gorilla in the pool or something.
right. Yeah, yeah. Interesting, huh?
That's why I have sympathy with China when they say China keeps hacking us, and when we accuse them of that, they say, "We're hacking you, you're hacking us." Well, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, but Sam, we don't publicize that we're hacking. We don't
Well,
publicize that we interfere with other countries' elections.
yeah, well, they try to deny it too, but it's incredibly transparent, a lie, just like our lie.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
fact is, we're both doing it to each other all the time.
right.
And
Exactly.
that's why I really don't want us to get in a shooting war with China. This would not end well for anybody.
Yeah. Well, it would for the financiers producing weapons.
Well, yeah, that's right.
That's who always wins, and the undertakers.
Well, yeah, there's that. Yeah, but I don't like that. Right. Well, anyway, there's another one. I think this is a Wired article. Yeah. Oh, no, it's
Okay.
another Ars Technical. The Medicine Nobel Prize went to a new form of RNA controlling genes, which I was very interested. I never heard of this. Nobody knew until 1993. There are these really small RNAs, only 21 to 23 bases long, which look like just junk RNA. And it
Right.
turns out that they're very important. They control which proteins are actually built out of the other RNAs. They're like on-off switches. And they remind me of the RNA vaccines for COVID, little batches of RNA. And apparently, they're very important. They discovered them in the roundworm, and then they found that they apply to all complex life, including humans. So the whole genetic code is far more complicated than I thought it was.
So, DNA has a code to it.
Right.
Therefore, right, you have three base pairs. We know what the code for
Four
that
base
is.
pairs. Yeah. And it has an error
Well,
correction.
I'm sorry, four base pairs, but you have three that specify a protein.
Oh, I didn't. One is just a filler or something.
No, no, in groups of three.
In groups of three, right?
They're
Right.
four
I make
letters, but
words, right, right.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then, and it's actually very accurate. And when you copy it, there's even an error correction pass. So the mutation rate is incredibly slow. I've heard a human typically has like 4 mutations in that whole thing over their whole lifetime.
That I don't know,
Yeah,
but there are what are called start codons and stop codons.
yeah,
And so that's where you start transcription and where you stop transcription.
right.
But what you're saying here is that we've got fragment, I'll call them fragments
Yeah,
of,
fragments
of
of RNA.
RNA that are also stop codons, the
They
equivalent.
they altered the behavior of protein coding RNAs. So remember, the DNA is used to print RNA, and the RNA is what actually builds the protein. And
Yeah.
apparently, there are these little short microRNAs that are involved in that process. And if you change them, they have drastic effects on the lifespan of the organism. They can cause it to die or have abnormal growth or something. So they are part of the normal function. Not just the
Oh, that's
long RNAs, long
interesting.
enough to code a protein, but there's little RNAs that are like on-off switches to control the other ones.
Yeah, got it. And do you know where they're created, how they're created?
I didn't see anything about that
No.
here.
Okay.
They haven't known about them for very long, and I think they've only gotten to the point of proving that they are really important and they really exist.
I see.
And
Okay.
so, yeah. Anyway, so is
And
this?
and 20 and they're 20 base pairs long.
Yeah,
So I mean
23.
that's not even viral particle size.
I know it's ridiculously small. That's why
Yeah.
people didn't even know they existed, and if they'd see them, they would say, "Oh, this is just some broken junk that doesn't matter."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If we were to compare this to space, it would be like a grain of sand amongst
Yeah,
the moon and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But apparently, it turns out to matter a lot more than they thought. So it's good to see. And I would imagine this will have great benefits. That's why they gave him the Nobel Prize. I mean, if you understand this, it'll probably create new medicine, new vaccine, understanding diseases that we didn't understand before, and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a pretty major discovery.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got one more,
Okay.
which is pretty bloody hilarious. There are a bunch of AI generated TikTok videos that have this property. They are pro North Korea. They talk about how I was in North Korea, then I went to America, and life was terrible there, and I went back to North Korea where everything is great. And then after that, they tell you about how now I take this supplement that makes you live forever. They're all trying to sell this supplement. They're ads for a supplement. And somehow to get your attention, they start with a pro North Korea message. So people are trying to figure out what's going on here. Uh, but there's a bunch of them. I escaped North Korea. Now I've returned as a tourist under a new name. I realized I made a fatal mistake 30 years ago by not taking this supplement that stops you from growing old.
So, Sam, just to review, the supplement industry is highly unregulated
Yeah,
compared to the drug industry. And you can make claims about just about anything you want. There has to be no scientific proof, or you can get away without
yeah,
scientific proof, or the studies that you do create can be very loose. They don't have to be peer reviewed.
yep.
And there's a lot of money to be made with vitamins and supplements.
Well, it used to be Dr. Bronner's magic elixir, uh,
Yeah.
which was usually like alcohol, laudanum, and lead. And the alcohol and laudanum really did make you feel better.
Yeah.
Or
And
cocaine or
what was
something.
it? Yeah, Coca-Cola originally with cocaine. Most
Yeah,
people know that by now.
yeah.
And then remember I think in the 20s or so, you had all the have you ever heard of, I think it was called the Invigorator? You'd fill it with water, and it was a water bottle, essentially water.
Uh-oh. Looks like you froze up. Wow. The American ISP froze up on you.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. And now you froze up for a few seconds, but now you're back.
Yep, I just got a message in Zoom. My internet connection was unstable. Okay.
Yeah, this is the American internet.
Interesting because I'm completely wired.
Oh yeah,
So,
but that's no defense, as we all found out last week.
yep. So anyway, the Invigorator was
Yeah.
this water jug. You'd fill it with water, and it was made out of uranium, so it was highly radioactive. And people were told to drink 10, 20 glasses of water from it,
Man.
and it'll improve your life.
Ooh.
And what it really did was it caused people to start getting cancers and
Oh yeah.
their jaws and tongues and tonsils, esophagus, stomach, all were getting cancers.
I would think so. And I read on about another one. There's a place where there's an underground mine that's radioactive, and people go there to bask in the radiation, thinking it's improving their health and stuff.
Yeah, that's over in Europe. And I think they were abandoned mines that were turned into like spas, if you will, underground spas. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of luxury to them while they're killing you.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the fountain of youth has always been there. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
interesting.
yeah,
Sam, I'll tell you a little story I'll share with you
yeah.
since we're on health. Interesting study about plastics and microplastics, plastic particles.
Well, I've seen tons of articles about that now.
Yeah, so a couple little research studies that I'll give you. And we know that plastics are in the environment, they're in our oceans, they're in newborns, they're in animals.
Apparently in our blood and our brains and everywhere.
Yeah. So there was a study that was done where they had rat colonies or mice colonies. And all of a sudden, the mice, when the cells were dividing, they saw abnormal cell division. And they thought, wow, this is unbelievable because it was leading to infertility with the mice. They
Yeah.
looked for air, they looked at water, they looked at food, they looked at everything that they could. And then they finally realized that whoever was cleaning the cages that the mice were in used a new cleaning compound that was decomposing the plastic. And
Oh,
so now the plastic particles were getting into the mice. So that's kind of,
yeah.
the first study that was done where they kind of realized this. They then realized that the mice were getting fatter. And so now there's a link between plastics, endocrine system, and obesity and fertility.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing in humans, people with high levels of plastic also tend to be on the heavier side. And you could say, well, they're eating more food or there are other causes. But if you take a look in the wild animal population, we're also finding out that animals are becoming fatter. And it has to do with the fat. These plastics are interrupting fat cycles as well as endocrine cycles. So, a lot more to be studied on this, but there are credible links. There are credible connections or cause and effects there, but we still need to do more research on that. But
Yeah.
it's becoming pretty clear the link between plastics and infertility and obesity.
Yep. And I think two other things I've heard a lot about in the last several years are
Yeah.
lowering male fertility, which is
Yes.
pretty bad. I mean, I was surprised. This came up in the politics when IVF came up, and all these people came up and said, we had to get fertility treatments to have our kids. And I don't think it was always that way, that so many people had to do that. And also, huge amount of breast cancer in women. And now that I read articles that say there's a lot of kids getting cancer in their like 20s now, and nobody really knows
Is,
why.
is that right?
Yeah, a lot.
The
Yeah,
Yeah, the other problem that you have is the micro plastic particles will also cling to lead and heavy metals and associate with that. So
yeah.
as it comes into your body, you're also bringing these other contaminants.
Well, it makes sense. You know, they have that huge garbage patch in the ocean. There's just tons of discarded plastic all
Yeah.
around us. And we don't really know the consequences of that, but it's not too surprising if it has some biological consequences.
Yeah, that we don't know about. Sam, I don't know if you know this, but do you remember the thalidomide
Oh, yeah.
babies?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Thalidomide was given to pregnant women to deal
Right.
with morning sickness, and it was very effective. And it turns out that there are two forms of the molecule. There's a right-handed molecule and a left-handed molecule,
Chiral.
just like you have a right hand and a left-handed glove.
Right.
It turns out one, and I don't recall which one of them is the one that causes the thalidomide babies, where they'd
Yeah.
have very shortened arms
Yeah.
or very shortened legs, really, really major
Birth
defects,
defects. Yeah.
birth defects. But it turns out the other version is very good and is currently being used. It's been revived to treat another disease, something that I can't recall. I don't know if you know, but um, maybe like tuberculosis. And it's highly effective in treating tuberculosis. But the drug has to be every tablet of that drug is highly monitored to make sure that it doesn't come in contact with a pregnant woman.
Right. And I know if there are a whole
Yeah.
bunch of drugs that pregnant women can't take, I've seen them. They say, if you are pregnant or you might be pregnant, don't take this drug. You know, there's a bunch of drugs that are known to harm the babies. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, huh?
yeah.
Yeah. So we're learning more every day, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a brave new world. And I think the COVID vaccine are the biggest leap forward recently of like a new medical treatment with huge applications all over the place. And there's going to be more.
Yep. And you still have people that are anti vaxxers that are coming out strongly against it.
Well, you know, I was encouraged by a podcast I listened to that said when the printing press first came out centuries ago, the most popular thing printed was not the Bible, it was the How to Detect Witchcraft. So they say the fact is, it's nothing new that when you have a communication medium, the first thing that spreads is misinformation, sensationalist lies, fake news is a huge seller. So it's not like we're any stupider than we used to be. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, the internet is the new medium. And you know, at first I believed in like the 80s and 90s, the internet will bring about a golden age where everybody is like over bigotry and there's all the accurate information because now you can find out the truth. But I should have thought more about this. You have a grocery store with every kind of food in the world, so mostly people buy ice cream and get fat. You know, it's when you have a huge bunch of stuff available, most people will go for the bad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
That's in retrospect. This is the old Grisham's law: bad money drives out good. Uh, so this is the problem with freedom. The alternative is to have the government, sanitize everything and have only official recommended good stuff out there. But we haven't gone that way. And
Yeah,
I'm not sure that's
yeah,
actually better, but we have gone the way of free speech. So we have tons of disinformation, and you have to wade through all this trash to find the good stuff. And most people don't bother.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of disinformation. There's a whole industry out there that I mentioned this before, started with the cigarette industry with a law firm in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And they went to the cigarette companies and said, for every day you cause doubt and confusion, spread
Yep.
misinformation, it's one more day you can sell your product and make a profit.
That's right. And so their product is doubt. And then the oil companies learned the same thing. And then the politics people learned the same thing. And really, basically, the modern Trump cult is based on it's answer to this. Right now, you just don't believe there are any scientists. You don't believe there is any truth. You don't believe there's any honest government or courts or anything. Everybody's just lying to you. And therefore, the only thing you can do is attach yourself to what looks like the winning team and make sure you're on the inside.
Yeah, and as Sam, you brought up in the past, a lot of scientific research is now faked.
That's absolutely true. And a lot of it
Yeah,
is fake. So,
yeah, yeah,
so that's the
yeah.
problem with this big lie. Like all good lies, there's some truth in it.
So, Sam, getting back to TikTok and the plastics,
Yeah,
there are a number of videos on TikTok telling people about plastic cutting boards and don't use plastic and use wood or some other material.
yeah,
And there's one woman that said that I think every month that you use a plastic cutting board, that you're consuming the equivalent of a plastic credit card of plastic. Now, somebody did the science behind this.
yeah.
And let's say you have a 2 pound cutting board made out of plastic.
That's right.
If that were true,
Yeah,
within a year, half of that or a quarter of that cutting board would be gone in
of
weight,
course, of
and
course.
the plastic would be in you, but that's not the case.
Yeah,
So you look into the claims a little bit more, and it was done with really exaggerated
of course.
data. Yeah,
Besides, most of the time, if you eat plastic, it just goes right through. So the question is, how
yeah,
much harm would that do? Like, I remember there's something went out a few years ago where these bottled water, they would shine light on it and show that there's little flakes of plastic in the bottled water, which I imagine is true. The question is, does that really hurt you? And I don't think we know.
yeah. I think that's the answer. We know that some plastics do,
Yeah,
and we know that even though like BPA, we've linked that as a estrogen or a female hormone analog that can
yeah.
mimic it, but we've made other compounds that we're not sure, but they looks like they in theory they shouldn't do the same thing, but in reality it looks like they're doing it. And maybe our bodies are modifying to recognize those other
Tell you,
variants.
everything I buy comes in plastic. I have a ridiculous amount of plastic to throw away every
Yeah.
few days. I don't like it much. I would much rather they use paper or something. Hopefully, the tide will turn on this.
Yeah. Well, didn't Newsom just outlaw plastic bags
Yeah, so we don't
in
have plastic
California?
bags. Now we have paper bags. I have cloth bags, but everything I buy
Yeah.
has little plastic containers that the
Yeah.
food comes in. So
Yeah.
it seems like the problem of too much damn plastic everywhere is still big.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. You have another story, or is that it?
I think that's it.
That's it. We meet up on Friday.
Yep.
Sounds
Okay.
good to me.
All right.